Hi, Jan. How are you today?
Good, Mary Lee. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So, for our audience, I want to introduce myself and Jan. And I'm a hypnotherapist and past life regressionist, and I've been teaching training, certification courses in hypnotherapy and past life regression for 28 years. Yeah, then those years start accumulating, don't they? And I've written 6 books, and I've written 2 on past life regression. And then my latest book is called Mastering Hypnotherapy. And this gives everything for the hypnotherapy training and how to do it. And it's those are 2 of these books are texts that are used worldwide for courses. A lot of trainers use my books. Anyway, I have a huge background in metaphysics. I started with tarot and astrology back in 1967. And then have been working with a teacher since 1985. I continue to do so, studying metaphysics and, all things past life regression. And so along the way, I met Jan. I'm going to let Jan tell you about herself and how we met and our little history. And then we're going to get into some questions. So the point of today of recording this is that Jan is super curious and always has the greatest questions. And I said, let's just have a conversation so that other people can benefit from your questions and my answers and vice versa. So Jan, welcome and tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Mary Lee. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in private practice in Everett, Washington. I'm a hypnotherapist trained by you. So I met you, we think, in 1997 when I was
Oh,
taking a class on hypnotherapy, and you were a guest speaker who came in to talk about past life regressions. And because I'm the curious, most vocal person, I'm like, I want to be the person. So I got to experience you hypnotizing me. And I really loved your style, your energy, your way of teaching. And so as soon as I finished the course, I became a student of yours and started doing all your classes and trainings. And we've traveled the world and we've been friends ever since.
ever
And
since.
I go to you with any questions I have about the spirit world, past life regressions, hypnotherapy techniques, your original book, which I don't know if you have there,
I don't have it right here, but yeah,
but it's
hypnotherapy.
my Bible. And
Yeah,
I dog-eared and
I
tabbed
need
over
to get you
pages.
this one because it's all updated.
Yes, I have that one. Of
Oh, you
course,
do have this
I have
too?
every book you've ever written
Oh, okay.
and some.
Yes, right, plus.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yeah.
wonderful. Well, anything else about you? I mean, I said you're curious, you always have the greatest questions. And anything else about you? You're an
Well,
amazing therapist and
yeah, I do a lot of work with people that have questions about connecting to the spirit world. I've done some trainings in mediumship. I'm more a person that reads the Akashic records than can connect to the spirits per se. So I've done a lot of work connecting people to people that do readings, and that's always really interesting. So interesting. I read as many books as I can on it, and I'm just very interested in the soul connection between human beings and the spirit world, the connections we make before we come down to the physical world, the contracts that we make, the reasons why we choose these families or experiences, because sometimes it's hard and people are just like, why, why have I had to have this experience? And the more information I have on the soul's journey, the better for my work. Yes.
absolutely. Well, for your own sake as well, but
Hmm.
also for the clients that you and I both serve, the
Yes.
more education and the more grounded in foundational concepts and reality-based information about these processes, the better we can serve our clients.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah. So in your work, how often are you doing like, because I know you see people for psychology, you're a
Right.
licensed psychologist. And
Yeah.
so how often do you bring in past life regression? What part of your work do you get to do the fun
I
stuff?
wish it was more often, but people have to get to know me and trust me first, generally, especially when they come from like the Boeing world, you know.
Right. Yeah.
More there for the I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. Okay, let's work through all that. And then they'll become curious about my office, some of the books I have on my shelves, my conversations about, it's quite possible that you're learning something from this life experience, from history you have as another kind of soul in another life. And they're like, what? Wait, tell me more about that. And then it leads into a conversation about past life regressions. And then they have the most amazing experiences when we do a past life regression. I've had people that are very religious come in and just want to do hypnotherapy for anxiety. And then they're on a camel in the desert, at
Right. Yeah.
1500. And we'll go through it. I don't, we just go through it. And then at the end, they were like, that was a past life. I didn't know that I would ever have this experience because it's not in my belief system,
Right.
but it is what it is, and it shows up when it shows up. And then we
Yeah,
work with it.
oftentimes spontaneously like that.
Yes.
I think it's very beneficial for coaches, mental health counselors, anybody in that helping position or counseling position to have this information because people can go in spontaneously and have these memories and also if you're treating addictions, I always access past life regression in working with addictions, habits, relationships. I mean, it's just so relevant to everything. And
Yeah.
so having these tools available is just should be required, I think. But
Absolutely. I wish we could do a past life regression on every single person on the planet, because then
yeah,
we'd know a lot more about our history, the accuracy of the humankind.
yes, yeah,
Yes,
true.
be
And
fabulous.
and what's interesting is when you go into past lives, you see yourself in all these different cultures, practicing all the different religions, speaking
Hmm.
different languages,
Hmm.
and having customs and rituals and all of this. And so then when you come back into your awareness here in the modern world, it's expanded our view of the world and other cultures and people. And I think we're a lot more sympathetic because now it's like, well, how can I, you know, be anti, some race or culture or religion when I used to practice that. And now I understand what those beliefs are. And so it just makes us more understand, more I think accepting of the people around us.
Yes,
Same
exactly.
relationships. Yeah.
Yes,
When
yes,
you go in, you're struggling with your spouse or your boss or your siblings or your parents or whatever, and then you go into these past lives and you realize all these different ways that you've lived together and, oh, I don't like this guy at all, but on the other hand, now I remember he saved me during that war.
yes.
It's like, oh, now I see him in a whole different light. Right?
Totally. I
Yeah.
had that experience with my ex-husband. He refused to help me financially when I left him with my two small children. Well, when I did my past life regression, I had gone back to a past life with him where he was a fellow soldier and we got into a war and he died. And then I went back home and I did not want to be married to this woman and she had two small kids and I left her and went off and became an alcoholic womanizer in Italy, left
Oh,
this woman with two small children in World War II or one, I can't remember. But
yeah.
anyway, so when I came into this lifetime, my friend from the past life, the soldier who had died, became my husband. And then he set me up to have the experience of being a single mom so I could have the understanding of what that karmic retribution? Yes. And
Yeah.
I was so thankful to him. I even wrote him a letter and said, "Thank you for the opportunity you gave me to understand." And I learned how to be self-sufficient because he didn't help me. I had to do it myself. Huge gift.
I remember that. You are
Yeah.
such a strong woman. I've told you this before.
Thank you.
Yeah, you were raising those two kids, no help, and going to school, getting your master's degree.
Yes.
When I met you, I was just like, oh my God, this woman.
Thank you, Mary Lee.
Yeah, when I feel lazy or like, oh, I can't have all these burdens, I think of Jan. It's like,
Aw.
all right, if she can do it, I think I can muster a little more energy.
It's hard to share that with clients, though, who are struggling at the time, say, someday you're going to understand the lesson of the
Yeah,
journey. And that's why the hypnotherapy is so important.
they can see it themselves right there.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
so instantaneous.
Yes.
Yeah, instead of
Yeah.
us telling them and counseling and trying to, convince or get them to see a perspective, you just take them into the trance and, most likely a past life, and then they experience that shift in perspective, and then they're there,
A
just
game changer. I'm telling you, it shifted me completely. The ball and chain left my ankle. I wasn't resentful and angry. I was like, oh, you gave me a gift.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
I set this up for myself, right?
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is what my soul needed.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
once we have that lesson, that understanding, it helps so much in your progression on your soul's journey here on the planet, you know?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you had some questions, as you always do,
Right.
right?
Yes.
What question do you have?
Well, speaking of the connections that we have with people that we attract in our lifetime, people have asked me, they've said things like, I really want to meet my soulmate, or I feel like that's a twin soul. And I'm like, I had an understanding. I thought of what a soulmate was and what a twin soul is. And I thought, I need clarification because I want to get it straight from you, the teacher. What exactly is a soulmate and what is a twin soul?
And you had also talked about twin flame, and
Yes,
those are terms that are put out there too.
yes.
So, first of all, we have to understand the terms in order to understand those relationships. And I don't use the term twin flame. There's a whole school of thought that uses twin flame, and I think that the people who use that are really referring to or using that term like I would use soulmate. So it's that one or that special relationship. So these are terms that are used for different relationships we have within the soul family, right? And so just like we have families here, there are people outside of our family, there's people inside the family,
Mm.
there's spouses, children, cousins, all sorts of levels of relationship, depending on, the proximity to the bloodline, I guess.
Right.
And in the same way, we have that in our soul connections. So we kind of have to build a model and, always remember that the model is not the reality, just like a map is not the journey. It's just some lines on a paper that gives us, a framework to talk about or to follow. So if we were to consider potentially that in the beginning there was one thing, right? One, we might call it God, we might have all sorts of names for that, but it was there in stasis, and that was all there was, right? There was just that. So you might even think of it as um, a fabric, just a plain fabric that's flat. Well, something happened, and we don't know what that was, that, maybe, created a snag in the fabric, right? And so that snag would then start creating a wave of some sort, a wave function. And then anyway, over time, and I'm not saying this is the way it happened, you know, it could have been the Big Bang, you know, whatever. So it could have been a wave, it could have been, you know, one molecule or electron that had an aberration and therefore set up a whole wave that, you know, affected everything over time. So eventually that one fabric broke up into some pieces, and it could have been thousands of pieces. It could have been two pieces, you know, but it broke into separate consciousnesses. And so axiomatically, you know, at the very foundation of our being here is existence and consciousness. So existence is, you know, you are in a location. It's, wouldn't you just know? Okay. uh, I was going to put this on airplane and now I did. Okay. Um, so the existence gives us location, it's our beingness. And consciousness gives us the ability to be aware that we exist, right? So that consciousness and existence was just one thing, and therefore there wasn't anything outside of it to observe. If you are all one, there's nothing to observe outside of who you already are. You already know everything in time, space, and that's the end of it, which could be very boring, right? It's like, Jan, what would happen if you knew everything already? What would happen to all your curiosity and that energy that you get from learning and finding out new adventures, right? So anyway, so this broke up, and so all the consciousness was broken up into separate pieces. But you know, it would all go back. The memories that each of those pieces would have were that they were one at one point, right? And so now they're separated out. Well, at that moment of separation, there are certain, let's say these are all the pieces, certain ones of those pieces have an alignment. So yes, they're part of that whole, but now they're separate, and then they have an alignment that there's a similarity of purpose and of skill, I would say intelligence, you know, they have traits that align with each other. And so, you know, of these pieces, each one might have, you know, one might be musical and one might be analytical and one might, you know, be very well organized or whatever. They'd have different, possibly different traits and combinations of those traits. But those two have, you know, connected, and that creates a soulmate connection,
Okay.
right? Because there's, you know, it's sort of like like magnets, and they have the right polarity in order to connect, and then they're soulmates, and they're soulmates until that's broken. So through eternity, they're soulmates. From what I understand, they're, because of the nature of the connection, there can be up to 4 soulmates. Okay, so they can connect, maybe, you know, you might see it as a cube, and they can connect on 4 sides, or a square, and they can connect on 4 sides. So you can have up to 4 soulmates. But then all the other pieces would be more like siblings. You'd have this relationship that is familiar, and it feels like a part of you, but it's more like a sibling. So that's where we call twin souls. Okay, so we have the soulmates, and then the other people are twin souls. Now, as we evolve and we learn, so all of these pieces, part of the reason to have these pieces was that then the oneness can go out and have more experience, right? So now we've got, let's say, 10 pieces of the soul that are able to go have different adventures. So some of them travel, and some of them explore music, and some of them, explore expression like that, or others, they're having these adventures, they're gathering information, and they're evolving. So as they evolve, some of those pieces may not evolve very quickly. They're like, oh, my piece of the pie is that I just want to enjoy sensuality. So I want to eat and drink and have parties, and, but they're not really evolving as quickly as maybe the musician, or, somebody else in the, one of the other pieces. So let's say one of these pieces, we'll call it this one. So this piece is just like Jann, gathering information and experiences, and integrating it and allowing it to transform and change them, right? Because gathering information isn't everything that's needed. What's needed is they need to integrate it and become a different creature, right? That's what transformation is. We go from the caterpillar to the butterfly.
Mhm.
So it's a different creature, same soul, you might say, but a different creature. Well, that's what happens when we're working on transformation. And so as we transform, let's say this one is really out there doing it, it's gathering information and experiences, no matter how challenging or how beneficial, how easy, they're taking it in. Like you said, you realized you were able to grow after your past life regression because you realized your ex-husband had given you that gift, and you took it in, and you didn't say, yeah, well, but anyway, you took it in and you changed into this new person. You could let go of the resentment. Now you're a different, you probably have more sympathy, or a different perspective, right? So that growth, let's say this one is growing and growing and growing, and there'll come a time when it has grown beyond the the body, or the container that it's in, right? It's growing, and then it will burst into pieces, just like the original soul. That'll yeah, I know.
That's mind blowing.
Yeah. Well, and then now let's say this one has, you know, all these pieces, and there could be a lot more than this number, but they're going to break out into pieces. So now their particular lineage, their particular bloodline, soul line, now, because they've gathered so much, now they want more, but now they've separated into separate pieces, and all those little pieces can incarnate and have their experiences and their learning, and can feed back here, that feeds back to the original soul, right? So now it's got this new level of tentacles.
Where's the original soul at? Up in the big fabric somewhere?
That's just the fabric, but
Okay.
now it's broken up, right?
Okay.
So
Got
the,
it. Okay.
the oneness isn't really there anymore because it broke up,
Okay.
right? So now it's these more independent pieces, and this one has broken again. So now when it breaks, it can, so if it was these and they're soulmates, and one of them breaks up, this one's still a soulmate, but it's got new components, and this one still has these twin souls, but this one now has broken up, and this one has different, or it has different twin souls now. I mean, they'll keep that soulmate connection, but now, like this one, where these were all twin souls to it, now it's broken up. So this really has disappeared. It becomes, like it becomes part of this group, and these are its twin souls. And then these to this one to this one are called karmic connections.
How do you know when you've met a karmic connection versus a twin soul?
Okay. All right, let's talk about that. So if you
Okay.
have a soulmate connection,
Uh-huh.
there's that strong, the soulmate connection is the best and the most challenging relationship.
Yes. That's what I thought. They help you evolve faster.
Help you evolve.
Yes.
Right. And so and if one is growing faster than the other one, there's going to be a strain. They'll start to strain because this one is expanding and growing and growing and evolving and dividing. And this one maybe was like, oh, I'm afraid. I'm not going to change. I don't want to change. I just want to keep things the way they are. Right. So the soulmate connection, can start to create. Ideally, they'll be working in lockstep. They'll be growing together, no matter how challenging, and continuing on this same purpose. That they will have the same purpose, but because they're coming from different soul group, a different division, they're always coming from a different division. Soulmates would not connect within the same, like if okay, I guess I have to go back to my diagram. So we
Okay.
had the one, let's say when it divided, it's my palms. So now we have two, and then they divide, and then the soulmate is connected. So we have twin souls here, soulmates there. But these are not directly related to those. And they can be coming from, different cultures, like fairy worlds and lizard worlds and whatever kind of worlds that are out there. They may come from different, almost like different soul races, right? Which is good because then there's more variety and, it's sort of like you don't want to, you know, keep marrying your sister or your cousin because down the line it's not going in the right direction, right? So they're coming from kind of a different um, background, let's call it, and yet the purpose is the same and the characteristics and the potential is the same, creating the soulmate. That's made, but they have their twin souls and they have their twin souls, and those are separate. Now, this one separates out. It's a twin to all of these. This one separates out. And and so now it's got more. So, this thumb now has all these other ones, right? And these are still connected. But this one has grown out here. And so these are karmic connections to those. So the twin souls are going to feel more like brother and sister. So it's going to be comfortable. Again, you're likely moving in the same direction because you came off of the original purposeful, you've still got a lineage that you're sharing. And so it's very familiar. Usually it's a lot easier to get along with, but sometimes it feels like sibling rivalry. All right. So, it just depends on how those siblings act. But they can be it's in a lot of ways, it's just easier to live, like to marry and have relationships with your twin souls than it is with the soulmate. Oftentimes, soulmate is very important. It's so important that everything is like tender, right? If they offend me, it's worse than if my twin soul offends me, right? There's just that higher level of energy between us. But the twin soul, usually easier to get along with, or you'll squabble like siblings, right? But
Mm.
but you know, in the optimal picture, you would be working still towards that same goal, that in that same direction.
Mhm.
Then you've got your karmic connection relationship. Um, it may be somebody that comes along and you're friends for a while, and they give you some wisdom, or they're there at the right time, and you working out some karma between you, but you may not have that, lifelong friendship, or and you may be attracted, you may marry them, right? And same with twin souls, there there'll be that attraction, that familiarity, but it's a little more distant typically. It'll feel more like cousins than siblings. You
Can you learn big lessons from the karmic connections like you can from the others?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of times they come along and help, which could come in the form of a lesson. They can help from that direction, from creating a challenge. Um, But they could be the cashier at the grocery store, and that, one day you have an emergency, and they're there right at the right time, that sort of thing. But some karmic connections, become, maybe they're in your social circle, you're not really tight in particular, but it's pleasant, and you know they're there on game night or whatever that is, eh, it's those are more of acquaintances. And then there's the general population. So over time, I mean, we've been incarnating for millenniums. I mean, like millions of years we've been incarnating, whether on Earth or in other locations, other time, space, universes. Um, and so over time, we've had a lot of breaking up, soul um, split is what we call it, soul splitting. We've had a lot of that. So there's people that are no, you've split, and then you've split, and then you've split. And so you're out here in maybe the third or fourth split, and maybe people that you were close to back here before all those splits, they're maybe not moving along as fast. You don't have as much in common. You're not working in the same direction. It's still, you'll still run into them and they'll factor in your life, but they just um, aren't the ones that, you gravitate towards and say, okay, let's walk on this path and let's work on this project together, and that sort of thing.
Like we had our time already. Now we're over here with our new
Yeah.
twin souls and
Yeah.
soulmates and
Right. I still like you. And, if you want
yeah,
to come along, but I'm on a mission over here. I think the problem comes in when we think we find a soulmate, we're out there looking for our mate, and we think we found our soulmate. And because of past life memories, because all of these people have probably factored into past lives, and then there's millions out here who haven't. They're just, meaningless in that sense to your path, right? Um, these people have a lot more meaning, but on various hierarchy levels, right? Um, but you meet one and you have, you're feeling lonely and maybe a little desperate, and, you really want to get in a relationship, and you feel that connection. And subconsciously, there's a part of you that probably recognizes, oh, we've been in lifetimes together. Um, uh, there's a connection, right? And then we make it work, right? We kind of shoehorn ourselves into that relationship,
right. Make it fit.
make it fit, right? And then you get down the road a little ways, and it's like, what was I
Then
thinking?
the big challenges show up.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
think, oh, they've changed. And it's like, no, you've both, um, maybe had the facade for a while, but everything you needed to know was right out there if you had looked. But in our loneliness, or in our, the weak parts of us, we kind of overlook all of that and we jump in anyway. So then we end up, getting involved with either people that are way out here that shouldn't be the ones, or a karmic connection. I think twin soul relationships are actually very sweet, very easy, playful, or can be,
So I
uh,
have a question about relationships that shouldn't have been. Like then we go down this path that we shouldn't have. But wait a minute, isn't everything sort of predestined? Like the contracts were already made before we came here?
I don't think there's as many contracts as people think everything is a contract.
Like I was meant to have this experience, be with you, do this thing.
Right. So, contracts are like in the physical world, a contract is where you've got an agreement and, like a promissory note, I will do this in the future, I promise. And so, yeah, we are obligated to certain things in that regard.
Like our children, we contracted to have them as our children.
Not
No, not
necessarily.
even.
No. Mm-mm.
Oh,
No. Maybe, but I don't think we can assume that every child that you have, or every time you have a child, or everybody who has children has had some kind of contract. Easily, you could get pregnant and then there's a spirit out there that wants to come in and, you
they
know,
just randomly choose you
it
because you're
could be
pregnant.
random. It could be random, or it could be that there's a soul connection, that there's a purpose in it. It depends on how aware the spirit is. Some of them are acting out of fear, like we do here. Everything that we do here, we're doing out there. So if I get in a relationship because I'm afraid of getting old by myself and I'm afraid of being lonely, and I'll take this guy because he's there and available and willing, and I'm acting out of fear, even though I know he's not really the guy, right? That's just acting out of fear. And then I do something that could be a mistake. Same with the spirit out there. I'm disoriented. I don't know what's going on. I want to get back into a body so I can do whatever I want to do. And I'm just going to drop in there. And so it could be random. It could be random and thoughtless. It could be out of fear. It could be that somebody's pushed them in. I have an example in one of these past life books of a client I had who was just kind of sleeping away, and some entities pushed her into a body, and she was kicking and screaming, but there she was, and then then was born into a very abusive household, horribly abusive, like ritual abuse. And she came to me, it's like, what happened here? And it wasn't a choice that she made, but she was out there and not paying attention. And they kind of strong armed her, and they were just very negative spirits.
All right. So,
And
okay. But I'm very confused about like our soul would have evolved from that experience, right? Our soul, you had that conflict, you had that terrible relationship with these ritualistic, negative, dark people, but somehow your soul did have these experiences and maybe you evolved, maybe, right?
maybe. So
Oh gosh.
life is going to give you challenges, and it's
Yeah.
what you do with it that matters, right?
Right. Yes.
So, people say, oh, everybody's your teacher. No, they're not. They have not, put together a lesson plan or had necessarily any thought into why they're doing what they're doing or why they're saying what they say. But, um, but you can be a good student of life regardless of what comes along, right?
That's the most important piece right there.
Right. Those ritualistic, abusive parents were not her teacher. They didn't say, oh, let's cultivate a child so that her soul growth is in this direction. And in order to do that, we're going to torture her and abuse her. No, they were just,
Crazy dark energy, but her soul had the opportunity to learn from that
so
experience,
once she
should
was in
she
there
decide to.
and had to go through it,
Okay.
right, then she, maybe that was the wake up call. You know what? I need to be more aware and conscious, even when I'm dead. You
Yeah.
know, there's no
Can't
time,
be out there floating around sleeping. You could be
no
snapped up and thrown
time.
into a body.
Right.
My God, stay
So
alert.
you have to stay alert. And
Wow.
so, yeah, so that's, yeah.
All right. I always thought that because my son and he asked me one time why I had him. And that was really painful for your child to ask you, why did you give birth to me? And I said, because I feel like you asked me to. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you're out there floating around and all these moms out there that are pregnant, you chose me. And I feel like I was able to help you with some of the life experiences you were going to have because I was going to have some similar ones before you arrived. But I could say, I'll help him. I'll
Mhm.
help you because we're going to have similar paths. And so I feel like we kind of contracted. That's what I always thought, that we kind of created a plan that you would be my son and I would be your mom, not randomly. You fell into my body, you know?
Well, so random is one choice, right? It's not always random.
Right.
But let's say I die, right? I die and I'm floating around there, and hopefully I'm remembering my soulmate, my twin souls. I'm on a mission, so I'm remembering my purpose, and I know I need, it's more strategic. You have to be strategic out there. Who do I need to connect with? And how do I continue to further my purpose, keep aiming in that direction? And so then choosing, if you're really cognizant, then choosing your alignments, spirit guides and whoever,
Mhm.
but then choosing, where am I going to go? Where am I needed? Or where can I go that I can blossom in pursuing my purpose? So it might be with specific parents, it might be a location, you might have to wait for the timing. If I wait 3 more years, the society will be ripe for me to continue to do this. There could be all sorts of factors that you're considering. Most people don't consider those things.
Does
They're
the
just out
spirit
there,
Does the spirit out there doing that have an understanding of what's happening on the planet so they can choose the timeline that, you know?
To the degree that they're cognizant of
Okay,
things on the planet, right?
okay.
But otherwise, then you're kind of reliant on spirit guides and
Mhm.
helpers, and there are plenty of good, like just here, like in the physical world, if I'm really in need, I always think, oh, people have gotten so cruel and thoughtless. And then you see these things where, a person falls off a boat and everybody comes and tries to save them. And it's like, oh, there's good people out there that, that step up and, want to, even sometimes risk their lives to help another person. So
Mhm.
that'll happen up there too. So if you've accumulated good karma and you have some value, you're going to attract more valuable spirits who are going to come and say, yeah, we really need Jan here because she does such a good job. And let's help usher her over there and help her to find some, good entry points. And, they'll guide you and keep you safe and, together to do that. Um,
So that spirit of your friend, the person that you met in your book that was floating sleepily out there wasn't around spirit guides?
Evidently not.
Okay. So you choose or not choose to be around your spirit guides and masters and
Not
teachers.
everybody has spirit guides.
What?
I, I
Oh,
can see.
that's sad.
Well, I mean, people will have dead people around them.
Okay.
But okay, so take a look at the planet. Remember, as above, so below, right? So you
Okay.
look at the Earth planet, the people that
Mm,
are here. how many people would you say, that's going to be my teacher? I'm going to trust them to take care of my soul, to give me my lessons, to protect me, to usher me, down the road to my purpose. Can you name any?
You, for
Right.
sure.
One,
Yeah,
right?
I got you, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah, me, you
yeah.
got my teacher maybe, and maybe
Yeah.
there's some Indian guru, or maybe there's, somebody out there, and, there are some,
Mhm.
let's even say there's 100 people that would be worthy of, really taking a look and caring and having the time, you know. So you go out there in the spirit world, that's about how many, so you've got,
But
does.
like the bar in Star Wars, you
Yeah,
know?
it's gonna be like the bar in Star Wars.
Yeah,
But
okay.
those spirits that have the time, the focus, the desire to
Mhm.
put, because the teacher sets aside, oftentimes, unless it's part of their purpose, but they'll set aside, their purpose perhaps, or, you know, their vacation, whatever, um, to focus on your benefit, right? On your welfare. Well, you can't just assume that every high level spirit that actually has future vision and the ability, the strength to protect and usher and focus and all of that is going to tend to you. And if, like even on the physical world, let's say there's 1,000 good teachers, but there's billions of people. They
Yeah.
are not going to be able to focus specifically on all of those people. They can only specifically focus on those who are showing great desire themselves. Like, if you guide me, I will do what you say. I will learn. I'll let it transform me. I'll integrate this information. I may argue with you, but only for clarification, like for me, teaching metaphysics, it's fine if you argue, but if you say, well, no, my view of reality is different and I'm not going to change it. Okay, you need to find a teacher that resonates with you. I'm not the one, right? But I have my philosophy, my teachings, my way. So I'm not going to be the teacher to everybody. But same out there. Um, there's only so many true spirit guides to go around, and most of them are sharing clients, right? So my spirit guide might be paying attention to a dozen people, but then they have their own agenda, their own lessons, their own things they have to do, and checking in and figuring out, and trying to influence or have these conversations. So when you die, more than likely you're going to be, well, I'm not going to say everybody, but you'll probably be surrounded with dead people. Like, oh, my aunt always loved me and now she's here and she wants to usher me. And just like you might go to an elder to have some wisdom or help or conversation, what should I do in my relationship? Or you go to a counselor. So there'll be plenty of them out there, but they're not really the ones who are going to take care of your soul. So in her vision, how she saw it, she was sleeping in a cradle in a tree, so and those things are all just your imagination of how you're interpreting the energy out there. So
Right.
she's asleep and just like cocooned in. Well, if she did have spirit guides, maybe they were like, okay, she's okay for the moment. I've got some other people I need to take care of, so they're, doing whatever they need, maybe checking in, and that's gone on long enough that they're just like, okay, I'm busy over here doing this. And then these other spirits can swoop in and
As above, so below, like there's negative energy on the planet. You have to protect yourself all the time.
yeah, you do. Or have plenty of, connections out there that
Right.
if one guide has to go, they can leave somebody else babysitting you,
Oh
right?
boy.
Just, yeah, I
You
mean,
don't just go up there and rest.
no,
Tell you.
neither do you
There's
rest.
no rest for the weary soul.
Not really. I mean, there are places in the astral that are like hospitals, where there is comfort and a chance, to get away. But there's plenty of people, that need that. So, just to assume that you get to go up and rest, um, is not, and nor is there I've seen, um, I've heard of, um, paradigms where they say, well, you die, and then, these high level guides come, and then they take you to classes, and they take you to rest, and then they give you this book, and you look through all these things. Maybe that's happened, but that is not what happens to everybody. So again, as above, so below. When you die, every experience that you've had, and you've had millions of deaths, right? And every one of them is going to be different, just like every one of your birth is going to be different. Every one of your families and your cultures are going to be different. I mean, there may be similarities, but they'll be different. And everybody's different between us. If we all had the same experience between lives, we would all, it would be like saying, well, everybody comes in, they start kindergarten exactly at 5. They have two parents that stay together. They have one sibling. They have, and everybody has the same experience. No, everybody has a completely different experience. And in the same way, you're going to have a completely different experience in the astral. Number one, just your focus, your perception of the world, your ability to perceive that world, your goals, your purpose, your personality quirks. Maybe something really upsets you all the time. Maybe you've got addictions. Maybe, all these things that create who you are. Now you're in this other environment. You're bringing all of that with you, right? So, that experience is going to be completely different than somebody who spent their life meditating in India and working with a guru. Their life is going to be different, right?
Right.
Their death experience is going to be different.
There's so many questions.
I mean, this is a topic. I mean, I'm going to be starting teaching metaphysics again. And, these are the topics that we'll be going into, all these questions about the universe, about our soul progression.
I love it. In the interest of time, do we have a chance to talk about a term that a client used called soul braiding?
I know you brought that up to me, and I have never heard of it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but like I say, I have not heard of the term soul braiding. But why don't you describe what she described?
She said it felt like a soul had come into her and was a part of her being now. And I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. She was starting to explore what it meant for her. She was going to be talking to her teachers. And I'm like, I need to talk to Mary Lee about this and see if this is an entity, a possession. What is this? What does soul braiding mean? And I couldn't find any information on it. And I thought, I'm going to go to the expert first to see what you might perceive about this situation. And then I'll continue, obviously, to get her perspective and see what's happening with her and go on her journey with her. But I wanted to get a fundamental kind of teaching perspective about what might be happening. If there's such a thing where a soul comes in and braids with your soul to help guide you, like, what is that?
Does not sound good.
No, yeah.
Oh, so, like I said, I've never heard this term before. If I, and I have perceived entities that are trying to weave their way, weave their way in,
Mm.
um, that is not appropriate. That is not appropriate. So she would have to really see if, you know, if it, you know, and this is just outside the scope of, I'm just like making this up. I have no idea. But
Right.
let's say she split at one point, and, one of the splits was really weak, and somehow she decided, well, if you can weave your pattern back into me, we'll be a stronger unit together.
Just join me again because you're not doing so well out there.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. I don't know if it's even possible. Um, but my first impression would be that that's a possession. And
Mm,
possessions are never beneficial. They are always aggressive.
mhm.
No entity comes in and says, I'm going to rent space for free in
Right.
you. Now, sometimes, temporarily, um, like if you're channeling, you have to be really careful with things like that. But if you're channeling or, I know of situations where that's done on purpose, protected and temporary, right?
Mhm,
It's like, okay. And I've also had a situation where me from the future came and was here with me, not really braiding a soul, but here so that she could see where she had come from. So very similar to when we do a past life and we're taking that person's consciousness and they're going actually into the body of them in a past life and they're looking around and they're having that experience. If that past life person is really sensitive, they would know something's going on. Because imagine that, all of a sudden my person from the future is coming in and they're going, oh, what is this place like? Oh, look at these modern or these old-fashioned appliances, and look at how, you know, uh, antiquated this living space is, or whatever, right? Where's the zappers and all the
mhm.
space age stuff, coming in and experiencing that. I would have somewhat of a soft or subtle, all of a sudden being more curious about my space, right? Because they are, and that's influencing me. But when she says they're intertwining, that sounds exactly what entities do. They start twisting their energies into yours to get a stronger hold. So I would be I would, if I were you, but in a very non-leading way, obviously, you just want to see what her experience is and, extract from her what's going on.
We're gonna do hypnotherapy where
So,
I can go in and check to see if there's an energy in there that would
yep.
like to speak and explain if possible and all that. Or
Oh,
what is the purpose of the soul braiding the way she calls it and have her look at it from her higher consciousness, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And you've got all the tools to do that.
And that leads me into the future pacing technique that you do. So when the future aspect, the part of you that has, gone into the future and lost the weight, stopped drinking, made the decision you want to make, and that person now joins you, you step into them to
That's the role
feel what,
model.
huh?
That's the role model technique.
Yes, that one. And
And
then I have that energy of them having achieved their goals kind of stay with them to guide them. Is that
yes.
okay?
Oh, yeah, because that's them.
It's a role model of them.
Right, it's them a little further down the timeline. So, you
Okay.
see yourself in the future self that
Mhm.
has already acquired and
Okay.
integrated all this new learning and
Okay.
skills and talents or whatever, and then they step into that and experience it. Yeah.
Okay.
And
It's
then
not like the future part of them that's like coming back and saying, "What's happening? Why? What happened to Netflix? We don't have that anymore up here in the future." It's like it's an actual role model that they've created where they've achieved their goals and they're bringing that energy of that experience of having achieved that goals into their body.
right, so
Okay.
that they can feel. Yeah, so like in the weight loss example, sometimes people, want to lose weight and then they say, I can't even imagine what it would feel like to be thin. Well,
Right.
using that role model, they can
Yeah.
step in and they can feel themselves thin,
Okay.
and then they step back out, they feel themselves heavy, And then they, don't like it because now they have something to compare it to. They step back in and they feel
Mm,
light and healthy. And
mhm.
then you future pace them, what will it feel like in a week, in a month, in 3 months, whatever.
Got it.
And that's, dropping some cookie crumbs out into the future to inspire them to stay on that path. But it
Okay,
helps them to relate to what it would feel like to be in that other body or in that
got
other
it.
mind frame.
Okay, that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. Any other questions before we?
Well, in the interest of time, we'd have to have the rest of the day
I know.
answer all of them. I'm very interested in your future classes, of course, the metaphysics teachings that you're doing.
I will definitely be telling you.
Yeah,
And if anybody's interested, they're still kind of in the formulation stage, but I am being called to, step it up pretty soon. So if anybody's interested, they could go to my website where that'll be the announcements, maryleelabay.com. My name is in the corner here. And then you can sign up for my newsletter, and then I would be making announcements there. But this group the way I'm envisioning it is not going to be huge. I want just really serious, dedicated people who actually do want to make the transformations. And so it could be a very intimate mystery school, right?
your classes are always interesting.
Oh,
They're
thank you.
wonderful. They're mind-blowing.
Thank
Just
you.
you just have so much information to share, and you have such a beautiful, unique style of teaching, and your energy's just wonderful. It's just such a pleasure to know you.
Oh, and you and I always love you, Jan. We've had such great adventures
Yes,
together.
we have.
Yeah,
Yes, I hope we have many more.
got to make it happen.
That's
Uh,
right.
all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jan. And just create some more questions and we'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye, Mary Lee.